Hi, this is a tutorial on basics of Verbatim for debate. If you are a more experienced debater who already knows how to use Verbatim, I would recommend that you go watch the more advanced tutorial for Verbatim that will be released after this video. This video is designed specifically for newer debaters or people who don't know how to use Verbatim or have never even heard of Verbatim. In short, Verbatim is a word template that was specifically designed for debate. It is world-changing when it comes to making your card-cutting process more efficient and compiling speech docs faster when you're in round. So I would highly recommend that you download Verbatim on your computer if you are planning to take debate seriously. So if you don't already have Verbatim, then you can go to paperlessdebate.com/verbatim. I will include the link to this website in the description for this video, and you can just click on the latest versions for Windows and Mac. The installer is pretty straightforward and pretty automatic. It shouldn't be that hard to do. Make sure to download the latest versions. Quick side note, however, I have heard some complaints from some people who use Mac specifically that they don't like the latest version of Verbatim 5.2. I have been told that if you do not like that, you can use Verbatim 4.6 for Mac, and that is reliable enough. I'm not entirely sure the extent of the consequences of using an older version, and this is something I just sort of heard secondhand, but if you are having problems with the most recent version of Verbatim for Mac, then I have been told on good authority that 4.6 is a viable enough substitute. One thing I should mention is that Verbatim does require a newer version of Word, preferably Word 2013 or later. I have seen it run on Word 2007, but not particularly well. And the interface is a lot cleaner if it's on the most recent version of Word. If you don't happen to have Word, then there is a free trial available for 30 days off the Microsoft website that you can use. And if you don't have Word still, I would recommend that you just obtain it anyway. It is a piece of software that you should learn to use in your life, and it is something that employers or college admissions officers will think about will actually consider as a skill if you know how to use it. And it costs as little as, I believe, $7 a month. So that's a pretty solid investment for your debate career, especially if you're already someone who's willing to spend a couple $1,000s on camp. Paying a couple dollars a month for Word really shouldn't be that big of an investment. So those are the basic technological requirements. When you do download Verbatim, there will be a sort of automatic tutorial that runs. That tutorial can sort of be overwhelming, so I'm here to sort of clarify what each of those things means and demonstrate to you in real life what those functions really do. So the first major function, or at least the first thing we should talk about, is how the interface is set up. So you'll notice at the top is that in addition to your standard Microsoft Word tabs, a debate tab has been added. This is the one with all the debate macro functions, and this will usually automatically start up whenever you start up Word. If not, then there's usually a verbatimise button here that will turn the doc, whatever doc you're working on, into a verbatim document that you can then edit via using these debate functions. So you can, on this top interface where most of the buttons are, you can sort of divide them up into different functions based on the grouping. For example, this left side over here is mostly for speech doc compilation, making speech docs, or saving them into a USB drive or emailing them. This section over here is for card cutting functions. You have the headers here, which I'll show you later, as well as your basic card, underline, highlight, and cite functions, etc. Then you have some disclosure tools here. This I will go over in the advanced tutorial. And then over here you have verbatim settings. The settings are where you can modify the formatting of your functions. So there are a lot of tabs here. The one we're going to be focused on right now is the formatting tab. Depending on what team you debate for, they may have a specific format that they want you to do it in, and this is where you would change your settings. So you can change the font size of each of the headers. For some of the functions, you can change more things about whether or not you want to underline, say, the citation, or if you want your underlining to be in bold, or if you want a box around your emphasized text. So those settings are all here. You can change the font as well. If you so desire, the default is Calibri. So that's where you go to adjust your settings. I believe you can also change what some of these function keys do in there as well. So now I'm going to show you the headers. These headers, pocket, hat, block, and tag, are the ways that your files can be quickly organized in a comprehensive and a cohesive manner. So they use the headings function that Word has and sort of organizes them by level. So you have top level things, second level things, third level things, and that way when you have this navigation pane opened, you can quickly navigate through the different parts of your file, which makes these a really handy function, something you should be using whenever you're debating. So the largest header is the pocket function, and it makes this box here, and this is the highest layer in terms of the navigation panel. If you look on the left, you can see that it's created a line that says that includes the label I have given it in pocket. The next layer down is the hat. This is the second highest layer, and as you can see underneath the highest layer, it's created a sort of a next layer that is slightly indented, indicating that this is something that's folded underneath the top layer. So if you were to condense it, you would see that you don't see second highest layer anymore, and that's because that's something folded underneath that. The same logic works for block, which is the third highest layer. And then there is the tag function, which is still listed on the navigation panel, but you use specifically for cards. So when you've got your card, you would use the tag function on the text of your tag for the card, which is pretty straightforward, I think. And then, of course, once you're done, say, writing one card, then you would make another block for more organization, and that would still all be under this hat, which is all under this layer. And then after, say, I'm done with whatever section of the case that is under the hat, I could just make another hat for another section. And then once I'm done with this whole section under the pocket, I would make a new pocket. And we can see here that I could quickly navigate around all the different parts of the file via the navigation pane, which means that this sort of organization is incredibly useful and something that you should use in your files a lot. The automatic tutorial on Verbatim does a decent job of explaining how this all works, but I think it's better to see it in action. So I'm going to pull up an old file that we created. This was our major AF that partner Whitfield and I put together on the January-February topic. Resolve public colleges and universities ought not restrict any constitutionally protected speech. And as you can see here, we have used the verbatim header functions to sort of organize our case and all the front lines we had to it. So on the pocket, which is the highest layer, we labeled it 1AC because anything under this pocket was what we were going to read for the 6 minutes of the 1AC. Then we would use hat, and we'd split up the major parts of the case. So we used one hat for the framework, then another hat for our advocacy cards, then another hat, and then another hat for our preamps to one specific argument, and then another hat for the preamps to another argument. Then underneath this, one of the hats, we have blocks, and we use this to denote smaller pieces of offense. So we had 2 subpoints for our contention, and so we demarcated them with the block function. Likewise, for our front lines, specifically for our on-case front lines, we use one pocket for that. Our extensions were a hat, and then the specific parts of the case were written with blocks. Likewise, we had another hat specifically for the common case terms people would read. And then once we were done frontlining the case, we frontlined the disads with another pocket. And now, so you can sort of see how this logical structure ends up working and why it's very useful in a debate. So say I was debating AF, and someone read a counterplan that was the Patriot Act counterplan. Well, I just quickly scroll through the panel, and I see, oh, we have AT Patriot Act counterplan. And I can quickly bring this up and put it into my speech doc, and I don't have to go sifting through tons of cards or analytics to find my stuff. I can just go through to the header in the navigation pane if I know it's there. Of course, I can also search it up if I really needed to, and it would get the hit for the header right away. So those are the header functions. So those are sort of the first half of the most important functions I think that are up in this section of card cutting functions. The next most important part is actually using some things to cut an actual card. For those of you who don't know, a card is how we organize / compile evidence in LD debate. It is basically a paragraph or paragraphs of text that have been taken from an article and have been lined or underlined down to pick out the most important parts, and those are the parts that we end up reading in a debate. So I'm going to be demonstrating how to use Verbatim, how to cut a card, and walk you through sort of the process of making a card. So I have an article pulled up here from The Hill. It is a political article about Trump's tax cuts, specifically about how the Republican Party will want to implement retroactive tax cuts in the upcoming budget, and so that they get a political boost during the 2018 election midterms. So the process of cutting a card, the way I do it is first, I of course read the article and decide whether or not it is useful for what I want to cut, and then what you have to do is copy and paste the relevant paragraphs from an article into your Word document. So the warrant we're looking for here is that Republicans want to make tax cuts retroactive so that they get an elections boost in 2018. So I think that warrant ends about here. Yeah. So we'll just cut this first half of the article here. If you don't know already, you should always paste the entire paragraph. Do not ever paste part of a paragraph in, but not paste in the rest. So we have pasted in our article now. Next thing I like to do is make the citation. So a citation in debate is slightly different from your normal citation in school, where it's a very standard, rigid MLA formatting, or whatever it is that you happen to do. And you can do that for debate, however, it's not strictly speaking necessary, and I always personally just read out my cites anyway. Every cite should have some basic information. You should always have the name of the author, the title of the article, the potential qualifications the author may have, as well as the organization that wrote it and the date that it was written in. So and if possible, a usable URL. So in this case, we do have all of those things. I'm going to start making my site now. The name of the author was Naomi Jagoda. The article title was this. It was from The Hill, written in August 11, 2017. And it says that she is a reporter for The Hill. So we will put all those things in. You can do this however you would like. I do know that on the Verbatim website that there is a function called Site Creator that you can put in as a Google Chrome extension that will sort of do this process for you. I was personally never its biggest fan. You can use it if you would like. I am aware that it has a very limited function that it can only do it on certain articles and not all articles. I don't believe it works on PDFs, but you are welcome to use it if you want. If you don't like it, it takes maybe an extra minute to make the site normally. Now, when you make a debate site, not only when you're formatting it, you should include all of your relevant info, of course, the quals, the name, article title, etc., etc. But the way to finish off formatting the site is to write out the last name of the author as well as the last two digits of the year is written in. So Joe Goda is the last name, and 17 it was published in 2017, so 17. Depending on what team you're on, you may also have to put your initials or something of this sort after your citation to indicate that you yourself cut this card. Oh, my battery's getting low. This way that your coach can check, if you've been doing your work properly, and that they know, and that way they can give you proper feedback, or they just know how many cards you've cut. So now into the actual formatting. First is to make this a site. So on Verbatim, it's this button. If you have the function keys, you can actually press F8 on your keyboard, and it will make the site, and it will format it like the site. So this is the proper way to format your site, or at least one way you can do it, and that's sort of the basic way you should be doing it. You can make little tiny tweaks, of course, but that's the general format. So now the next part of writing out this card is, of course, underlining the most important parts. So we want to be looking for the warrant in this article, which is just a statement that Republicans in Congress right now want a tax reform retroactive so that they get an election boost because people like the fact that they got more money from the GOP. So Republicans are debating whether partially retroactive. So now we're going through the process of underlining this. We're looking for the warrant. So here we have a warrant about the next year's midterm elections. The reason we do this is because we don't want to read the entire article, because not all of the entire article is important for us. A lot of authors will put in very flowery language that's pleasant to read, but not necessarily efficient for when we have to read this evidence in the debate, which is why we go through this process. This is a good line, says that Congress needs to pass tax cuts that are retroactive in order for them to keep Congress. Might not have the best warrant behind it, but it's good language. Okay, so now we've underlined the most important parts of the article, or at least the parts that we think have the warrant. Now, what we have to do is that this article, the way it pasted in, was really spaced out, and it's sort of hard to read when you are in a round. So another function that Verbatim has is the F3 condense. And what that does is if you press F3, then it condenses all in one paragraph. If you happen to be doing policy debate, or if you're on a team that happens to care about this kind of thing, there's something called paragraph integrity, where when you condense an article, you must keep where the paragraphs break, and it's sometimes considered an evidence ethics issue. In LD, at the very least, it hasn't been a widely accepted norm yet, so you don't necessarily have to care about that, but that is something to keep in mind. If you are someone who does care about paragraph integrity, then if you go to the Verbatim settings, there is an option to retain paragraphs when you condense things. So you don't have to worry about not having to use the condensed function if you do care about paragraph integrity. Now, regarding the parts we don't want to read, since it's kind of distracting if they're all in the same text or same size font as the bold and underlined parts that we care about, there is the shrink function, which will shrink all that text down to size 8. If you want to shrink it smaller to, say, size 7 or 6, you just keep pressing this button and it will make those smaller. So I pressed it twice and it is now at Calibri size 6. So now the last part of cutting the card, of course, we have to write out the tag. And this is where you press F7, and then it makes sort of the tag header to the left over here, and then you write out your tag. GOP, retroactive tax cuts, benefit, GOP, gives them boost in 2018 midterm elections. And so we've now gone through the basic process of cutting a card using the tools in Verbatim. Now, later on, you'll probably want to go highlight down this card because the way we've underlined it, it may be very inefficient. Sorry about that. So you can, of course, either use the F11 highlight and select parts and then press that to highlight them, or you can, and this is my preferred way, is to click on the highlight button, and then you can go over it like an actual highlighter, go through all the parts that you need to highlight to make it more efficient in order to maximize its efficiency. So Republicans are debating whether their tax reform should be retroactive. Some Republicans argue that having tax charges take effect as early could help their case. The GOP must make these reductions retroactive to begin 2018. We want this tax bill to kick off the economy ASAP. So now we've highlighted down the card, so now it's more efficient. And one last card cutting function that exists is the emphasis function. And the emphasis function is something that you want to use when, say, you're reading this card, and there's this part that you know has a really good warrant that you want to sort of say louder or slow down for the judge on. So let's say this line in particular about Republicans keeping their majority, so it's pretty good. So we want to emphasize that. So we hit F10 or the emphasis key or the emphasis button up here, and it makes a box around that text, or at least that's the way my settings are set up. And so I know when I'm going through this card, I need to read it with a more emphasis on that particular line. So I would say, Congress needs to pass tax cuts that are retroactive in order for Republicans to keep their majorities in Congress. The tax cuts will help spur economic growth and wage increases, etc., etc. Of course, a lot of this is up to your own personal discretion, how you choose to format things, or the specific process you go about cutting or formatting a card is up to you, but the basic product should look something like this. So those are all the basic verbatim functions. You may see some other things on here, such as the automatic underline. This is one of those little bells and whistles of verbatim that I personally never found super useful. Basically what it does is that it sort of looks at the tag you write and then tries to underline the text for you. Several things to mention here is that A, it's not particularly good at actually letting it down, and B, it's always just more helpful to cut your own cards because that way you actually get familiar with the things that you have to read and round. This other thing is an automatic underline mode, where if you press it, you can, it puts you to a mode where if you just highlight a line of text, it will auto-underline it for you. This is actually sort of broken for me on my version of verbatim in Word, and the general consensus I've heard from other people is that it also doesn't work for them very well either. So just use the F9 function. It's good enough, and it will, and this only really saves you maybe a couple of seconds. So that's it for basic verbatim functions. I hope you found this useful. If you're wondering what the rest of verbatim does, or if there are any little buttons in here that you're confused about as to what they do, well, there will be a more advanced tutorial coming out alongside this video.